Well, Ravi, one lawmaker called it political theater. Another says deploying the National Guard is against the law. And Mayor Johnson says no one in Chicago is asking for the help. The response follows President Trump calling both the mayor and the governor incompetent.
America, Chicago is facing the perfect storm of complete governmental failure. And President Trump just put Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor JB Pritzker on notice. The city is staring down a $1.6 billion budget deficit while crime continues to ravage neighborhoods. And now Trump is threatening to send the National Guard to restore order. But here's what's really wild. Johnson called Trump one of the biggest threats to humanity, while his own city burns through taxpayer money and can't protect its citizens. Meanwhile, Pritzker is threatening to fight federal intervention in court while proceeding over the largest municipal financial crisis in decades.
He is one of the biggest threats to humanity that we've seen in an entire generation. And as mayor of the city of Chicago, and as someone who understands the premise of our Constitution, we are justified in our resistance to his authoritarianism.
What is up, guys? Tyson, Dela, Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This is what happens when you elect leaders who care more about the virtue signaling than actually governing. Chicago is collapsing and the people in charge are more worried about fighting Trump than actually fixing their city. Let me break down just how catastrophically these Democrats have mismanaged Chicago's finances. The city is facing a $1.6 billion deficit, and it gets worse every single year. Here's the progression. $116 million deficit in 2024, $942 million in 2025, and now projections show a $1.6 billion budget deficit in 2026. That's not bad budgeting. That's complete financial incompetence. That's heading straight towards one of the biggest municipal bankruptcies in American history.
But I want to make something perfectly clear. These individuals are not being sent to cities to police cities because they're not trained to police. These are soldiers. Soldiers. They don't go through the training that our police officers go through.
And where did all the money go? While Johnson complains about Trump cutting $830 million in community violence prevention funding, let me tell you where Chicago's money actually went. Billions and billions of dollars on illegal migrants, green energy scams, and bloated government structures, with 50 aldermen making $130,000 each year. Chicago had $2.3 billion in American Rescue Act funds, $3.3 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And what did they spend it on? Everything except for public safety. They spent money on high efficiency electronic appliance rebates while people were getting murdered in the streets. Now Mayor Mohawk Brandon Johnson keeps claiming that crime is down in Chicago. Let me tell you the real story behind these numbers. Yes, some categories of violent crime have decreased from the historic peaks of 2020 and 2021, but Chicago still has a violent crime rate well above the national average.
Look, crime is down in Chicago. Crime is down. There is more work for us to do. But, he wasn't adamant about ensuring that the $830 million of funding that he took away from community violence prevention and intervention.
And here's what Johnson doesn't want you to know. Crook County, which includes Chicago, recorded the highest number of homicides in the nation in 2024. The city is still experiencing more homicides than New York and Los Angeles combined in many periods. And here's the kicker. 67% of arrests in Chicago result in, guess what? No prosecution. Think about that. Police are doing their job, making arrests, but prosecutors refuse to put criminals in prison. It's a revolving door where criminals know they'll be back on the streets within hours. The Chicago Police Department is short over 2,000 officers, the largest police shortage in 50 years. While they're cutting the recruitment division budget by $1.9 million, they're complaining that they don't have enough cops while literally cutting the budget to hire more cops. Let me tell you the kind of leadership Chicago is getting from Mayor Brandon Johnson. This guy called Donald Trump one of the biggest threats to humanity, while his own city is falling apart.
And again, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt doubling down on the president's agenda and then criticizing the Democrats' response to his plans. Listen to this.
I think it's despicable that Democrats cannot agree that we need more law and order in a city that has been ravaged by violence, crime, murders, property theft. This should be a winning issue for all Americans. I don't understand. It's just anything President Trump does, the Democrats want to disagree with. I think the president would love to work with Democrats on this issue to bring law and order to America's cities, but unfortunately they have failed, and that's why he's taken this historic action to federalize the National Guard.
Johnson claims that sending the National Guard would be destabilizing for the city. Destabilizing? The city already has 1,000 carjackings per year, the highest homicide rate in the nation, and residents are fleeing in droves. How much more destabilized can you get? Listen to this arrogance. No one in the city of Chicago, residents that I've spoken to, the people in this city, no one has ever asked for the National Guard. Really, bro? Maybe that's because the people you're asking for help have already left the city and are too afraid to speak up.
Mayor Brandon Johnson says there is no need for the National Guard. Similar to D.C., violent crime is down in Chicago.
It would destabilize our city, quite frankly. No one in the city of Chicago, residents that I've spoken to, the people of this city, no one has ever asked for the National Guard.
Johnson brags about the 30% reduction in homicides and the 40% reduction in shootings, but he's comparing the historic highs of 2020 and 2021 when Chicago was literally a war zone. That's like bragging about only having 500 murders instead of 700. It's still a disaster. Then we have Governor JB Pritzker, who Trump accurately described as incompetent.
And while the president criticized Johnson, he gave Governor Pritzker a good dose of it as well.
Pritzker's an incompetent. His family threw him out of the business, and he ran for governor. And now I understand he wants to be president. But I noticed he lost a little weight, so maybe he has a chance.
Pritzker's response? He's threatening to fight federal intervention in court, claiming it violates federal law. This is the same governor who's presiding over a state where the largest city is heading towards bankruptcy and has crime rates that rival war zones.
He says if the president sends the National Guard to Chicago, it will immediately be fought in court because Pritzker says it violates federal law.
It's not surprising to me that he suggests violating the law. He's done it many times and been convicted of it 34 times.
Pritzker says it's not a surprise to me that he suggests violating the law. He's done it many times and has been convicted of it 34 times. This guy is more concerned about attacking Trump than fixing the disaster in his own state. Here's what Trump said about Chicago. If we need to, we're going to do the same thing in Chicago, which is an absolute disaster. We have a mayor who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man.
If we need to, we're going to do the same thing in Chicago, which is a disaster. We have a mayor there who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man.
And you know what? He's absolutely right. When local leadership completely fails to protect citizens, when they're more concerned about political theater than public safety, when they're driving their city towards bankruptcy while crime runs rampant, that's when federal intervention perhaps becomes necessary. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt put it perfectly. She said, "I think it's despicable that Democrats cannot agree that we need more law and order in a city that has been ravaged by violence, crimes, murders, property theft. This should be a win issue for all Americans." She's right. This should be a bipartisan issue. When American cities are being ravaged by violence, crime, murders, property theft, every elected official should want to fix it. But Democrats would rather fight Trump than protect their own constituents. America, this is what complete governmental failure looks like. Chicago is facing a $1.6 billion deficit, has the highest homicide rate in the nation, is short 2,000 police officers, and has a 67% non-prosecution rate for arrests. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Johnson calls Trump one of the biggest threats to humanity, while his city burns and Governor Pritzker threatens to fight federal intervention in court instead of fixing the disaster in his own state. The residents of Chicago, unfortunately, you get what you voted for, but you deserve better than leaders who care more about virtue signaling than public safety. They deserve better than politicians who spent billions on illegal immigrants and green energy scams while neighborhoods become absolute war zones. Trump is right to threaten federal intervention. When local leadership completely abandons their responsibility to protect citizens, when they're more concerned about fighting the president than fighting crime, when they're driving their city towards bankruptcy, that's when the federal government needs to step in. Unfortunately, most of Chicago voted for this disaster, but they deserve better leaders who prioritize their safety over political theater. Elections have consequences, and Chicago is living with the consequences of elected leaders who hate America more than they love their own city. Let me know what you guys think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.